and welcome to another edition of Hunt to Eat's Community Kitchen. My name is Michael Cravens, and it is October. October means a lot of things to a lot of different hunters, but to me, and many others like me, it is synonymous with squirrel hunting. Squirrels are one of my favorite small game to hunt. I find them challenging, they improve my marksmanship, and they're what I cut my teeth on growing up in the Missouri Ozarks as just a boy. Back there we had eastern gray squirrels and fox squirrels. Out here in Arizona we have several other interesting species. The one thing all of these species have in common though is they are delicious at the dinner table. But the first step in getting them there is processing. So that's what we're going to do here today. So for this project we only need a few tools. Small sharp knife, a pair of kitchen shears, and then a disposable grocery bag for our scraps. Really, you could get by with either the knife or the scissors by themselves, but it helps to have both. Now, here is our squirrel we're working with today. This is an Abert's tassel-eared squirrel. They are common throughout much of the Rocky Mountain West, and an absolutely beautiful animal. Granted, this one's headshot, so he's not looking his best, but that is certainly the best way to get good quality meat. Now, there's two primary ways to skin a squirrel, the tail method and the shirt and pants method. I'm going with the shirt and pants method here because it's consistent and it works every time. The tail skinning method is a neat trick, and man, when it works well. But especially with an old tough squirrel like this, I tend to mess it up as much as I do get it right. So for this demonstration, we're going to stick with the shirt and pants. Now, the idea is to make a slice through the back of that skin. Be careful here because this is where you're going to get hair on your meat. So try to make a nice clean cut, keep things clean. Then the idea is to get your fingers inside of that skin and rip in opposite directions, pulling off that skin like a shirt and a pair of pants. Now, again, this is an old tough squirrel. These things don't always work cleanly and the way they're supposed to, so sometimes it takes a bit of finagling to get you there. Now, I know there's guys out there that can make this look simple. I'm just not one of them, and I've been cleaning squirrels my whole life. Like I said, they are tough, and they can be difficult to clean. Now, if you'll notice here, as I'm pulling on this, I start to rip a little meat up there at the arm. So I'm going to back off and take my time and just kind of work my way through this slowly. And as I'm doing this, one thing I'm trying to be careful of is keeping my hands clean and keeping that hair off the meat. Once hair gets on the meat, boy, it's tough to get off. You got to go through and pick them off individually. It's not something you can just go through and rinse. So try to be aware of your fingers, and you're always brushing those little bits of hair you get on there off. Now, regarding processing tools, most hunters carry a good knife, but the truth is a pair of kitchen shears is far superior to a knife when it comes to small game and birds. So if you don't have a pair, get yourself a pair. And make sure you get a pair with a bone notch. When using that bone notch to cut off feet, I like to cut right at the joint. The reason for this is it doesn't leave sharp edges. It tends to leave blunt edges, and that's important when you're packaging your meat up for the freezer. Any sharp bones can puncture that packaging, compromise it, and of course lead to freezer burn. Having got the rear end of the squirrel skinned out, I'm going to move on up here to the front. I'm going to be a little extra careful up here because I did start to rip a little meat when I was first initially trying to pull that shirt off. And you might be asking yourself why I'm cleaning these squirrels at my kitchen sink rather than out in the field. And the truth is, I like to have a nice clean work area, therefore I don't end up with dirt, bits of grass, a lot of hair, things like that. I have running water. So what I do is I always have a cooler with frozen ice jugs in the back of my truck when I'm hunting. Therefore, when I do take an animal, it's easy to get it back to the truck, get it cooled down quickly, and it's going to stay good like that all day until I can get it home and I have a nice clean work area to process it, and that's going to lead to the best end product available. Now, I do sometimes clean my animals out in the field, and in that case, honestly, you just got to be careful to keep things as clean as possible. It's a little bit more inconvenient, but it's certainly doable, and I think that's how most folks do it. But if you have the opportunity, I recommend bringing them home with you, where you can work in your kitchen and keep things nice. And here we are removing the head. Again, we're just going to use our kitchen shears for that. It's really quite simple. So just snip that off, and there you have it. A skinned out squirrel. So yeah, certainly not easy, but absolutely doable by anybody. Now, since I'm working in my kitchen and I have the luxury of running water, I want to keep my hands clean of any stray hairs, because now I'm just handling the meat. And of course I want to keep that as clean as possible and free from hair. Now, I like to just take a disposable grocery bag when it comes to gutting, and I'm going to make a cut starting at the sternum and going all the way up through the abdomen. Now you want to be very careful here to keep the blade of those scissors between your abdomen and your intestines. You don't want to cut into those intestines. You're going to have an awful stinky mess. If you do this correctly, this is going to be painless. So basically all I'm going to do here is start up in the rib cage, grab the heart and the lungs. You'll have to rip through that diaphragm, but once you're through that, you just kind of pull everything out in one fair swoop. It's not too much trouble at all. So after you get the bunch of it out there, kind of just go through, pick out any little pieces that have gotten left behind or are torn away. Now, in most cases, I would stop here, give it a good rinse. I would nestle my squirrels together in a spooning position into a freezer bag and freeze them for later use. Now, the reason I do this is because if I intend to, say, braise these or boil these squirrels until the meat is falling off the bone, I'm going to pick all that meat off and use it for a special dish. Then I can do those squirrels whole. But if I'm going to fry them or use them in a stew or something of that sort, I'm going to part them out. So for the sake of this demonstration, we're going to go ahead and skip right to that step. As you can see here, the first cut I'm going to make is right in front of those two back hams. These are arguably the biggest and best bites you're going to have on a squirrel. So here I'm going to take off that little nub of tail there, and then I'm going to split these guys right down the center. Now, as I work here, I'm going to go ahead and keep things nice and clean and do all my trimming as well. Therefore, when I am done cutting the squirrel up, everything is going to be clean and trimmed up and ready for the freezer or the pot if you want to go ahead and cook them right away. Alright, and this next cut we're going to make is going to be right behind the ribs and across the backbone. This is going to give us that lower back section, and I know I said earlier that the rear quarters are arguably the best section. Well, this is going to be a close second, and some would probably argue it is the best. You get two big bites out of both of those back straps, and then those flaps of belly meat hanging off there, you definitely want to leave those. They are just as good as any other part of the squirrel, and some refer to them as squirrel bacon. So after removing a few little extra bits of hair here, I'm going to move on to the ribs. I'm going to make a cut right behind the front shoulders, and I'm going to leave this rib cage whole, and then I'll trim it up for the desired use later. If I were frying it, I might trim off those lower section of ribs, but if I'm going to braise it, the meat's going to come off pretty easy, and I'll probably leave them intact. Some go ahead and cut those ribs off right away, but I like to leave them, and therefore I get a little bit more meat out of it depending on the use later. And finally, we've made it to our front quarters. For these, again, just like the rear quarters, I'm going to split them down the middle. There's going to be a little bit more trimming on these guys because, these were near the head. It was a headshot squirrel, so there's going to be a little bit of bloodshot meat in there, but it's really not a problem. Just trim it away. So there you have it, a perfectly processed, portioned, and clean squirrel ready for the pot or the freezer. So no matter how you like to eat these, young squirrels fried, an older squirrel like this in a braised recipe, they are the best eating small game in my opinion. And not only that, they take you into the woods at the very best time of year to be there. This has been Hunt to Eat's Community Kitchen. I'm Michael Cravens. Thanks for watching.